never know if I'm joking or not. I'm like, that's a great idea. I'll just start doing it. Hello and welcome to Literary Canon Ball, a podcast for anyone who wants a fun and feisty conversation about books. Literary Canon Ball is inspired by the work of the Style Account and the Vita Survey that reveal the ongoing gender imbalance in the conversations we have about books. We are striving to correct some of that imbalance by talking about books written by women from around the world. I'm Kirby Fenwick and I'm joined by Neve.
Hi, I'm Neve Marnie, student by day, writer, editor by night, and reader by nature.
Because you're getting so good at that. And Fee.
Fee Murphy, addicted to the crown.
How are we feeling today?
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
All good?
This
All
is
good?
our last summer episode for this season.
Yeah.
Hence the book.
Yeah, I think we've picked a great book for our last summer episode.
It's got this nice nostalgic vibe to it as well. And
Yes.
and then we're on to autumn and layers, and I'm very, very excited.
Pull the scales back out again.
Yeah.
So, to our book for episode 10. Rosie and her parents return to Awago Beach, the small town where they have spent their summers since Rosie was a little girl. There, Rosie will reunite with her younger friend Windy and fall into the familiar pattern of beach and bikes and lazy afternoons. At least that's what Rosie thinks will happen. Teetering on the brink of adolescence, but not quite sure enough to ditch childhood forever, Rosie finds herself swept into a web of her parents' marital problems, teenage pregnancy, and horror movies. A classic coming-of-age story, This One Summer, written by Mariko Tamaki and illustrated by Jillian Tamaki, was published in 2014 and received a swag of awards, including the Eisner Award for Best New Graphic Novel, the Printz Honour for Outstanding Young Adult Literature, and the Caldecott Honour for Exceptional Picture Book Art, which is incredibly impressive. Neve, you suggested This One Summer to the pod. Why?
Basically, I suggested This One Summer because it was when I was researching banned books for a project I was doing, and this book came up on the top of the list. Actually, if you go into Google and go banned books, like 2016, it was at the top of the banned books in the American ALIA list. And so I was I've always, I wanted to bring a graphic novel to the podcast. I knew it was really well received, and also there's something incredibly alluring about talking and reading a book that people tell you not to read.
Oh my god, I couldn't agree more. I think I put this on my Twitter or my Instagram that if you ban a book, I just want to read it more. And I'm sure I'm not the only person that feels that way.
I know, it's so contradictory. But yeah, basically the reasons it's banned, I think it's adult themes, LGBT characters, I think language and stuff like that. So yeah,
Language. Is there swear words in this? Maybe my filter for swear words is so corrupted that I don't notice any bad language in here.
I mean, nothing about it seems
Unless
too
the
extreme
word
to me.
slut.
Yeah, that,
maybe.
or like just talking about sex generally is so like
Yeah. You wouldn't want teenagers to know anything about sex.
Oh,
I know.
maybe all the boob stuff?
Yeah, and the
Yeah,
blowjob stuff.
possibly.
I quite like those scenes. Tut-tuts.
Oh, that was
Boobs,
so
boobs.
cute.
I really want to talk about their friendship.
Yeah.
I really want to talk about Rosie and Windy's friendship. I thought this book, this graphic novel, really captured that so well. Just that kind of, they're friends and they've been friends for a long time, but there is that age difference between them, and it seems a little bit more obvious now with Rosie getting a little bit older. But I just loved that friendship that they shared and how it kind of, they had little fights and little arguments, but it was okay. They would make up, and it would just it was just really, really well done, I thought. What did you guys think?
I definitely agree. I thought that the friction was present from the get-go, and I think a lot of the age difference played into that because Rosie was starting to become interested in people beyond Windy and was feeling attracted to the guy in the kind of corner store video shop, and having a tag along, it's not kind of inducive to like being the cool girl who's just going to borrow the horror film and just kind of like get noticed. But I really liked how it wasn't an obvious confrontation between them, but lots of little points of extreme friction.
Yeah.
Particularly around Windy uses the word kidding quite a bit, and Rosie just gets to the point of agitation and is just like, stop saying that. Like, that is such an argument that happens in summer when you're around someone for long periods of time and you're just irked to hell by little things.
And I think that those points are sort of exacerbated by the fact that they do spend so much time together. You know, I don't think that ever goes away, no matter what age you are. Yeah. If you spend a lot of time with a friend or even a family member, those little sort of, you know, parts of their personality can start to grate. Even if you really love that person, it doesn't matter.
Probably more so if you love them, because you're like, just be better for me, please, and I will make you better by pointing out your flaws. And that's not how I think at all.
What did you guys think of the illustrations?
Oh, gorgeous. So beautiful. And it's so, I was talking about this before with you guys. It's so cinematic in how, like, there are some shots and double page spreads. There's just colour and shape, and it's gorgeous. Like, it's sort of like a wide shot in a film. And then there are a lot of moments where it's so contained and it's so in Rosie's point of view. And you can see that with the speech bubbles, how some are cut off or like they don't have any words in them. Like how like a child or anyone really can zone in and out of conversations. And I thought that was really lovely. Visually.
I really kind of latched onto that feeling of, it felt, I mean, we're kind of guessing her age, you know, with around that sort of 12, 13 sort of age. That's what I felt. Yeah. But I very much felt like it was the perspective of a 12 or 13-year-old. I felt like I was sort of jumping back into that, where she's not, you know, particularly around the conversations that are being had by the older kids at the corner store. It doesn't feel like she's quite across exactly what's happening. She's sort of catching bits and pieces of it. Yeah. I thought that was really, really, really well done. But the use of blue was really interesting.
Yeah, just everything's just blue.
Yeah.
I felt that kind of almost softened it to a point of nostalgia, and I really connected with the illustrations of them, like you said, being quite cinematic, but they were also continuously surprising. Yes. It's tied together with the colour blue, but aesthetically the illustrations change significantly throughout the book, that you never know what you're going to come to next with the illustrations. Some sections, the faces are quite plain to the point that you're applying your emotions to them. Other times they're quite vivid, and it's the same character, but how they've actually been drawn kind of relates to the context and the words. So the words and the images are so tightly intertwined that I would be quite interested to know if they storyboarded it together or if the illustrations came after.
That would be interesting to know.
I feel like they would, like, just in terms of, because they're related, I assume this is a project
they worked on together.
Yeah, and so that was collaborative. Yeah. But I could be assuming.
Another thing that I found incredibly evocative was how much sound is in the book, particularly in the illustrations themselves. So it's not in dialogue, but there's this really wonderful sequence right at the end of the book where they've just driven away from the holiday house and each room is empty, but throughout each frame of the empty spaces is just a tick, tick.
You could hear it.
Yeah.
I could hear it.
And the clock is just...
Yeah.
in another section where they've just used the word slut, and Rosie kind of has like taken this word and has kind of used it in a way that she feels like she's kind of righteous, or she's correct in using the word slut. And then she gets reprimanded for using it, and then she's walking away and her thongs are making the sound slut, 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 slut.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of layering in this, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, it is a really beautiful story. And also I really latched on to that kind of, you know, as I said in the introduction, that kind of teetering on the brink of adolescence and childhood.
Yeah.
I just think they have captured that feeling of, you know, wanting to be grown up. You know, she's having these feelings about this guy at the corner store. She's kind of invested in their lives and what's happening, but she's got this friendship with Wendy, and, you know, stuff's going on with her parents, and she's all sort of, you know, she's just in this sort of like swirl of like hormones, and the world's changing and she's changing, and I just thought it captured it so much that I almost felt like I was back in that moment myself. Like I could almost feel like that, and like remember what that was like for me when you're at that point in your life as a young girl, and everything is confusing and you're not sort of sure where you are or where you belong or who you are, and I just thought they captured it so well.
Yeah, and it's gorgeous because as well as making us feel it, you get the sense that Rosie is feeling nostalgic about her childhood, even as like she's living it, because she's exiting into a new stage of her life. So she's excited or very keen to try and get to like sort of that teen, like idolized like teen sort of life, but also at the same time she's missing and really almost mourning the loss of sort of some of their childhood memories, like the rocks, and, you know, have that sort of happy time with her family that once was and now longer is gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
I found that kind of interplay between being conscious that the world isn't an innocent place, but at the same time being in quite a seemingly innocent place of age, but also location, because the beach is somewhere that they've spent every summer going to. They've got a lot of memories. And I felt that the DVDs where they start hiring horror films to just impress the guy at the corner store. But I found it really great that they're watching them and they're absolutely terrified, and they're like, no, we shouldn't be doing this because this is like a little bit too much for us at the moment. And they're aware that they're not adults, but they're not children, and they're in this strange in-between zone
space,
and that the world is something. They're aware that there are dangerous things and horrible things in the world, but they can kind of start to control how much they're exposed to because they're still in a quite relatively safe space.
I love that idea of watching scary movies with your hands over your face and like just pick, because I mean, like I'm a little older than these girls and I still do that.
Oh my goodness. When I
doesn't go away.
I watched Jurassic Park with my head firmly wedged behind my mother's back, so she had to sit on the edge of her chair at the cinemas, and I was like, I'm really enjoying this.
What do we think about the adults that are present in this book? The parents and Wendy's mum and the grandma, who I actually really
the
like.
grandma was great.
What did you think about them?
Oh wow! Like the dynamic of the two parents who are trying their best but failing and trying to connect, but like fighting, and they're going back to this place that has some great memories, but also, as we discover, some very really terrible and like traumatic events happen as well. So that interplay was really well done. Like it sort of brought you back to like if like your own parents fighting and any sort of family tension or drama.
Yeah,
you could feel it.
You could feel it. Yeah, absolutely. What did you think, Fee?
I really liked how that storyline came out slowly. Really enjoyed the pacing of that. It made me, because there was so much space around it, because we don't get full conversations, we just get little fragments. I was like, oh, is it like, why is that marriage in strife at the moment? And I kept looking for clues as what she would have been doing, looking for clues and not getting that information neatly packaged. I thought really worked with the narrative tension throughout the piece. And I thought it was quite interesting how parallel to that, so her parents are having quite a lot of arguments and they're bickering, is that storyline of another relationship between the guy at the corner store and this girl that he's seeing who becomes pregnant. And they have very public and very loud arguments surrounding their relationship. So you get a lot more information about that relationship
than Rosie's parents. Yeah, it's
which
a real juxtaposition, isn't it?
Which makes Rosie then come to certain conclusions because she's confident that she has all the information she needs. So she puts it squarely. She's made up her mind about that relationship. And at that point, when Windy is a bit like, Rosie, I think you're kind of overstepping the mark. And Rosie says, I think it's stupid that girls can't like take care of their stuff and then everything is fucked up. Maybe she deserved it of getting pregnant. And I just realized there was a curse word in there that I didn't realize. There we go. There are curse words in here.
Skipped straight over that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that really, I was really intrigued by the way that, you know, it's kind of like that, you know, she wants to be the cool girl with this guy at the corner store who's a bit older, you know, so she's taking his side in that situation and she's... You know, she's using the word slut and she's kind of blaming, is it Jenny?
Jenny.
Yeah. She's blaming Jenny. She's putting all the blame on Jenny and leaving...
They
call him the judge, don't they? And leaving him sort of free of any responsibility in that situation. I found that really, really interesting. And it wasn't overdone. I think it was there and you sort of read it and you were like, and seen it. But it wasn't... They didn't labour that point. It was just kind of there, and it's like, you know, I remember those feelings too of like, you want to be the cool one, you know, you don't want to be the you don't want to be the, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't even know. But you want to be that cool girl that the guys like, and so you often take their side when you shouldn't.
Yeah, definitely.
You should at least question it.
Yeah, and I think that dovetails really well into a couple of different things of like the horror films and how like women are often portrayed in horror. And that it's mentioned in the books of like, and she says, oh, why can't these girls save themselves and da-da-da. And then it also dovetails into how we see the adult women in this book really like they talk to each other and support each other, and how at the age of like 12, you've internalized all of this stuff, all of this misogyny, and so I don't know why, but a lot of girls I know, including myself, have this like point in their lives where they think, oh yeah, well I'm the cool girl. I don't care, like other girls aren't like me, da-da-da-da. And then you grow up and you're like, that was such bullshit.
Yeah.
But she hasn't
gone there yet.
She hasn't gone there yet. And I'm like, that's such an honest sort of place to be. And the thing is, because we don't have so many coming of age stories about girls, it's not something I've seen a lot, but it's something I know does happen.
Yeah, from your own experience.
Yeah.
What about Wendy then? Because she calls Rosie out a number of times and she's like, don't use the word slut. Why are you putting all the blame on Jenny? And has information and knowledge, and
I think she's been raised differently.
Yeah.
I think she's been raised in a different house. She's raised with a mother who is clearly very strong and I would say very feminist.
Yeah.
Her grandmother appears to be quite a strong woman as well. I think Wendy's been raised in a different household.
Which is why I don't think necessarily the cool girl thing is like that rite of passage.
It's certainly not a rite of passage.
Oh, it's not a rite.
I just think it's a common experience.
It's definitely common.
And I liked how it's contrasted that, because I can't see Wendy doing that. I think she surprisingly is so... She's her own person completely, but without it seeming obnoxious or fake or just a piece of fiction. So,
but I also wonder whether the age difference plays into that a little bit too. Whether she hasn't quite got to the points where Rosie has with some of that stuff as well. Like I get what you're saying, and I feel like she has come from a different environment because it seems like her dad is in her life, but she's raised only by her mum. Like, she lives just with her mum. So, yeah, I almost wonder whether, Wendy hasn't quite got to some of those points yet. Because what's it, like 18 months between them?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that also is motivated by, like, especially for, like, you know, straight kids or people who are going, you know, sort of... who are going to have attraction to boys. I think a lot of that is that sort of internalized misogyny is motivated by that.
By that attraction. Yeah,
and by feeling like you have to present yourself like in a certain way for boys. And she's not at that point yet. But also at the same time, I do think, it could just be how she's got raised. Like, you get the conversation with Rosie and her mum, and her mum just says, I don't want you to speak like that, don't use that word. But there's a couple of panels with Wendy and her mum, and they're sort of suggestive of something of a very different sort of conversation.
And things are explained, and she's educated in certain things. I definitely I got the impression that Wendy was educated around body image and what body development and what to expect as the female form changes.
She even seemed more at ease with her own body. Than what Rosie did, which was really wonderful, but also could be, I think a part of that is the age difference as well. But she definitely, there was, that little bit of more comfortable in her own skin and at ease with herself, where Rosie felt a little bit more awkward and unsure and
that kind of growth spurt phase where you don't feel like you own your body. You wake up with a different one every day and you're like, what is happening?
So much of this book just transported me back to that point in my life, and it was just it's kind of like it's a hard place to be, but it's also a really beautiful place. I can feel myself getting emotional about it. It's just such a really beautiful part, I think, of a young girl's life, that point, you know, that sort of transitional stage. And like you said, Neve, we don't get these stories.
Exactly.
We don't get them. And so when you get it, I just really latched onto it, and I just feel really almost protective of this story in a way, which is really funny. But I do,
And also, if you've ever had a holiday, like summer holiday, when your family or family friends are in the same space in a cabin at the beach or anything, this will vibe with you so much. There's just a sequence, and I love it so much, of just panel after panel, and there's no dialogue, just
timestamps. I thought that was my favorite. Gorgeous. Absolute favorite. Particularly how much information it gives, because somebody's taking prescription pills at 3:43 p.m. Who is that, and what are those pills? Like, it's really good with setting up a lot of scenes there. Yeah, the illustration work is top notch. It's just and I can totally understand why it's won, like, you know, every award possible, because, like, the combination of the story, which is just so incredible, and then the illustrations that go with it that are just so brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you don't even have any cover left because there's so many stickers on your
I know.
There's all
copy. These silver award stickers on here.
Would you, given that it's banned, and I believe it's banned in more elementary schools or public libraries, or
that's
more the band is for young children.
Generally, unless the school's very conservative or religious, it tends to be that parents don't want younger readers.
I don't think it's a blanket ban, though. I think it's
specific to
school districts.
And also there's the difference between a challenge and a ban, and that you can get into that if you like want to as well.
Yeah.
But given that there are topics in here that are, I mean, I found some things in here like I had to take breaks and found confronting. There is one sequence where somebody commits an act of self-harm, and there are a few sections in here with the pregnancy and things like that I felt like were done in such a visceral way that it's like it's true to life. It isn't kind of flowered over or anything like that. How would you deal with this book with like recommending it to people?
I mean, I don't feel like this, I'm pretty sure this is categorized as YA, but I think it'd be on the top end rather than, because I think people are sort of like, oh, it's like 12 to 18. I think you'd want it from like maybe 14, 15 above. You wouldn't, even though it explores tweenhood, I think some of the content might be a little bit much. But also, every child is different, and so I think that's just a value judgment.
I think that's what I would do. I would base my, I mean, I would recommend this to like anyone 16 and above. Absolutely jump in, go for your life. 15 or 16 above. But if they were sort of a bit younger than that, I think I would base it on my knowledge of where they were at in their life and how they were situated, because there is some heavy stuff, but I also think they're important conversations.
Yeah, definitely.
And if the person in your life that is around that age can do that, and you can, or someone in their life can have those conversations, go for it.
Yeah. Particularly
young girls.
Yeah, exactly. And absolutely. It's one of those things where we're very protective of our children, and obviously that's an obvious thing, but they're still going to be engaging with these things anyway, just in their day-to-day lives.
You can't hide it from them.
And a lot of them are timeless conversations and timeless issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is one thing that I really enjoyed about this is it doesn't actually say when it's set.
Yeah, it's not sort of, and I didn't mind that, which was funny because
I really enjoyed that.
I struggled with it so much with our last book, but I didn't mind that with this. I didn't need to know exactly, what sort of era or year we're in. I mean, you kind of think, they're watching DVDs, so it must be like a fairly sort of recent
anywhere in the
frame.
last 15 years.
Yeah, on a laptop.
But you didn't need it. Like you said, a lot of the conversations and the themes are really timeless, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah. It's a 2 thumbs up from me. Very enthusiastic 2 thumbs up.
Most definitely. The same.
Ditto!
Yay!
And just to paint a visual, there were thumbs.
There are
lifted.
There are thumbs everywhere at the moment. To our recommendations for episode 10, what have we been reading and watching and listening to that we want to give the 2 thumbs up to? I think you're up, Neve.
Yeah, I suppose I'm first. Okay, so, alright, I've got 3 things on my list. First one is a movie called The Incredible Jessica James. It stars Jessica Williams, who I think was a Late Show alum, is doing stuff with 2 Dope Queens, and so she's amazing. Basically, why I love this is because, number one, it's super, like, I'm gonna say millennial, but not in a derogatory way, like in a very current. I like the snappiness of the writing, but also at the same time, I actually saw this thread on Twitter where it's sort of like, just give us like rom-coms, and not like anti-love rom-coms or like, oh, let's subvert, but like just straight up funny, well-written rom-coms, and this is what this is, and I appreciate it.
That is so true, because all the rom-coms of the past few years have like tried to subvert it with an agenda of like, oh, romance is dead, I'm beyond that, and they just like really, they're so negative.
I've seen that movie and I wholeheartedly agree. It is such a lovely film. It is just a real a real nice way to spend some time.
Yeah, it's a real treat.
And she is amazing.
Oh yeah, she acts the shit out of that role.
She's so great.
Brilliant. And I love her, like, she's sort of like an Emma, as in like Jane Austen Emma character, in terms of like, she's probably not to everyone's sort of taste, but also like she doesn't give a shit.
Yeah.
She's just living her life, and I'm like, good on you.
Yeah, that's a good movie. That's a really good film.
Exactly. Plus it like mentions theatre quite a bit, and I'm like such a theatre person. And there's a whole lot of stuff about like women supporting women, and
yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that's lovely too. So
yeah,
just
it's got a lot of high points.
Yeah, great film. All right, next one is a TV series called One Day at a Time. It's American on Netflix. I think the second season has just dropped on the Australian Netflix. I'm pretty certain. Basically, it's a remake of a 70s the TV show of the same name. A very sort of traditional sitcom in terms of like, you know, like multi-camera, like laugh tracks, but it's not traditional in terms of it's focusing on a Cuban-American family who the mother is a veteran and she's working as a nurse. She's got 2 kids. She's a single mom. She's living with her, they're living with her mother, who's like amazing. Oh my god, that character, her name's Lydia, and she's just, oh god, I love that character so much. She's fabulous. Basically, I love everything about the show. It's such a good time. It delves in quite into like a lot of social issues, but in not in a preachy way, in a very like considered and original sort of perspective. One of the characters comes out, and how everyone reacts to that is really well considered and well written. There are points that deal with Penelope, who's the mother, her depression and post-traumatic stress after serving. Just basically, like, you just binge it and you smile and you laugh and you cry, and it's just so good.
Okay, also have watched a few episodes of that and really enjoyed it.
Yes!
So well. I think
so
we like just doing the same stuff.
Yeah, it's just fabulous. Also, like, just in terms of just reading about what I'm watching, there's a point that someone made. I probably should, if I find the actual tweet, I'll link it on the notes and stuff. But basically, one of the main characters, who's like one of the only sort of white characters, Schneider, and in every story arc, his whiteness and privilege and the fact that he exists in that space is really like pointed out. Like, the white male is not a neutral character as often sort of white maleness is portrayed. And I'm like, that's a very interesting and really like great choice to make. Absolutely. In your writing. And last but definitely not least is Black Panther.
Woo!
Oh my god. This film was so good. Oh god. Yeah, I was already like super pumped. Like, I've been waiting for Black Panther since like the beginning of last year, since it was sort of announced. Oh man, where do you even start with this film? Good lord. All of the acting is fabulous. There's a really particular sound and look to this film that's really beautiful. Like, it doesn't sound or look like any other superhero movie that I've seen. It confronts like colonialism and race relations in a way that's really direct and really interesting. Especially because, like, in Thor Ragnarok, that sort of also addressed colonialism, but in a very subtextual way, whereas these are characters who are talking about like the impact of colonialism. There's a scene where the villain goes into the British Museum, and
which exists because of colonialism.
Yeah, and I'm like, as soon as like there's a exterior shot, and it's like British Museum, like, ho 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 ho, some shit's about to go down. Yeah, and it's just so well done. Also, there are points in this film, it's just very like energetic. It often feels quite youthful in its tone, which I really like. The two siblings, T'Challa and his sister, whose name can't quite get at the moment, their dynamic I really enjoyed. Also, just flat out repping women. Like, the female characters in this film are so well layered and textured. Like, there's Lupita Nyong'o's character is a spy. There's another character who's like a warrior. His sister is basically like the smartest person in the Marvel universe, and she's just amazing and a lot of fun. Like, go see this film. You will not regret it.
I've already
It is
booked
so
my
good.
tickets.
So keen. Oprah was on Twitter today. She got out of the cinema and started tweeting immediately.
Oprah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, there's a scene in the film where T'Challa, so Chadwick Boseman and Lupita Nyong'o's character sort of have like a very subtle, like a very understated sort of love interest storyline. And so the first time we meet in the film, he sort of just sees Lupita. He's like, "Hi," and I'm like, "Oh wow, I feel you. I feel that moment."
Because that's how you would respond if you seen her. Because I would.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's relatable. That is completely accurate content." So yeah, basically, those are my recommendations.
That's an exciting list.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I can't wait to see Black Panther. I'm like hanging out. I've got a couple of days and I'm going. Should I go next?
Yeah, okay.
So I've got a book and a TV series. The book is Woman of Substances by Jenny Valentish. I think I'm saying that correctly. Which I just finished like a day ago, 2 days ago. Really great. It's kind of like memoir / non-fiction, exploration of women and their relationship with substances, drugs and alcohol. But she also sort of touches on kleptomania and sex and like all those other, just like addiction basically, and the many and varied forms that it can take. She sort of, intertwines her own experience, talking about her own sort of experiences with drug and alcohol abuse or addiction, and sort of the impact on her life and her body and things like that. Really, really, some of it's really heavy going, but she writes about it in this really almost, it's kind of so just like really factual and sort of to the point that at some moments I was kind of a bit taken aback by what she'd written, just in the way that it was quite sort of blunt.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, did I just read that sentence? Like, and I would read it again and I'd be like, yep, still like really blunt. But that's only sort of a couple of times throughout the book. But it's just really interesting, she has spoken to a lot of people who work in the industry, a lot of researchers and scientists and, drug and alcohol counsellors, and, she talks about like AA and like, those sort of experiences as well. And she talks a lot about how, all the things that we know about addiction are mostly about men's experiences of addiction, because a lot of the research is about men and their experiences of addiction, because there's kind of this misconception that it's mostly men who are impacted by addiction, which is like not the case.
Yeah.
And she mentions that kind of, thing about how the symptoms for a heart attack are actually different can be different in women. But, that's not something that that's only something we've recently kind of known, because we've always been taught the symptoms that men experience, because most of the research was being done on men. And we know this about, pharmaceutical research as well, is they do a lot of the research on men because their bodies don't fluctuate with hormones like women do. But as Jenny Valentish talks about, the fact that women's bodies fluctuate like that, through our cycles, or people who have periods because their bodies fluctuate like that, that has a real impact on their experience with drugs and with alcohol and other sort of forms of addiction. So if you're not doing that research, then how are you able to effectively treat people? So it's really interesting. She covers a lot of really interesting stuff, a lot of really interesting topics, and really has obviously done her research. So it's a really good read, really interesting, but it's also slightly infuriating because, you know, I read those things and I just get so angry that research hasn't been invested in, and we haven't followed that up, and, you know, and I think that just speaks to the sort of patriarchal structures that exist kind of in every facet of the world, and science is no exception, unfortunately. So yeah, really good book, Woman of Substances. The other thing I want to recommend is it's on Netflix, Queer Eye, which is a redo of the original one, which I think is a few years old. I'm not a big reality TV person, you know what I mean? I don't mind it, but I'm not the sort of person that watches that and tweets about it and things like that. But have been really taken by this series. I've watched like the first 4 or 5 episodes, I think, and I've just really fallen in love with it. The guys are just really beautiful and really like funny and all the rest of it as well. But I'm just really kind of captured by that, the way that they sort of jump into these men's lives and just the changes that can be wrought and how emotional that can be, and how like stunted some people can be or stuck they can be, and how sometimes they just need a bit of a shove or to be pulled out of that rut, and how much it can change someone's entire perception of themselves if they just get a haircut or get some new clothes, or, you know, just have somebody step in and teach them how to cook a dish or something, you know. Like, they seem like really shallow and unimportant things, but it's kind of beautiful to see the impact that can have on people. And episode number 4 in the current series is actually I was in tears watching it, because the man that they go and help is actually gay, but he hasn't come out to, like, a lot of people, and he hasn't come out to his stepmother, and it's just really beautiful how he's able to sort of really grab that part of who he is and be proud of it, and tell his stepmom that he's gay and he's in a relationship with this very attractive man. And it's just really sweet.
Oh, that's fabulous. I'm gonna go watch it.
Did you watch the original?
I do remember watching a couple of episodes of that, but I remember Carson. Was it him? He was the blonde one, and he was like just hilarious. So I do remember watching a little bit of that one, but so I suppose that's why I was sort of taken by this one. But also has been a lot of chat on Twitter about this over the last week. Like, I just kept seeing it again and again, people talking about how much they loved it, and I'm like, I gotta check this out. And I loved it too. So that's what I've got for this one.
Nice one.
What do you got, Fee?
Well, I've been doing a lot of walking lately, which actually I do a lot of walking all the time, but so I've been getting through some podcasts. So I've been inventing reasons to get out and listen to some podcasts. One of them is called The Butterfly Effect, and it's by Jon Ronson, and it's part of Audible are trying to create more original content, which is really cool. So they're getting more into storytelling, and they're funding really high quality documentary sort of storytelling. And they got Jon Ronson in, and they gave him a year, which is incredible, because he is an amazing investigative journalist. But to like get inside this story for a year, it's wonderful. And he was like, "What am I going to do? I'm going to look into the porn industry, because I don't really know how I feel about it." So he didn't know exactly where he was going to take this story. And he kind of explains that along the way of these 6 episodes, but he lands on the idea of the butterfly effect, and one thing connected to the next, and having massive ramifications. And he uses that metaphor in this narrative arc of this 6-part series
Yeah.
of where he uncovers where the porn industry changed from being sort of like a certain style of industry which attracted a certain people, and it had quite a lot of wealth involved, and the industry was set up in a very specific way, to how it's transformed to it being available everywhere. And there's just like Pornhub, and there's all these websites and things like that, and how porn is now presented, and it's super fetished in terms of he goes into detail of, they used to make films, people would buy the films, but now people search for specific things that they want, so the porn makers have to tag everything in the film of what it is. So if it's like there's multiple people in it, if it's an orgy, what sort of orgy, what ethnicities are the people, what are they actually doing in it, is it like related, like are they nuns or are they like school kids, like schoolgirls or whatever. It's like all specifically tagged up to be search optimized. And how did that actually happen? And he tracks down this one guy who did do a few things that changed the entire porn industry to get it to the point where it is today.
Yeah, wow.
And it's such, when I was thinking, because I didn't know much about the documentary before I started listening, but the amount of angles he uncovers and stories and people that he talks to along the way, you just are so emotionally invested in the different stories that come out of it, because he talks to people who are going to California to become porn stars because porn has been so normalized that they're like, oh, I could do that. But then they get there and realize that within a month or so, they can no longer get work because they've reached saturation point where nobody wants to see them in films anymore. So they have to get something new. So it's like people who are actively keen to get into the industry are being funneled through the industry at this rapid rate, and the people making the films aren't getting any money because of like piracy and things like that. And it's just all these different economic things that I had no idea about. And then he talks to the ramifications of, now we have all this porn available, what is the impact to the consumer? And he talks to how it's affected people's lives and what are people doing to make money in the industry. And it goes in all these different directions.
Yeah, right.
And it's just fascinating that one guy who's really good at coding and organizing information has completely changed the world. It's
kind of scary, actually.
Yeah.
It's kind of scary, and how quickly it's happened. My favorite thing, though, is John Ronson's very good at not judging people. Rather, he's a very obviously quite an endearing sort of person, because he manages to pull really interesting personal details out of people, and they're quite comfortable talking to him. And it's just quite a really nice listening experience, because I mean, the subject is so polarizing in itself that it almost seems like an open and shut sort of thing of like you either are for or against. Simple. But it's not simple at all. It's so complex. And
it's kind of John Ronson's stick, isn't it? To take a subject that seems black and white and then just complicate the hell out of it.
So I was, by the end of the episode, episode 6, I almost cried, because there was one storyline that I was not expecting. I kind of really hope it works out well for the person, but there's just this, and he cries in it as well. It's just takes it to a place where you're just like, I don't know. It's worth listening to. It is fascinating, well researched. I mean, it's beautiful documentary making that I hope they continue to do, because I mean, to spend a year on a project and interview hundreds of people in multiple countries around the world,
it's almost unheard of nowadays, so it's good.
And I don't know if this would work as a book. I mean, I'm sure it would work, but the fact that it's audio,
there's an intimacy to audio that I think you can't really get with any other medium.
And there's kind of you know, the sound of porn, like the stuff from like the 60s or that sort of thing. It's like kind of like, and how it's changed to what it is now. And like they just do really fun things with the sound effects throughout, and you're just like, yeah. It's great. So that's the Butterfly Effect podcast. And the other podcast I've been listening to is Deadly Manners, which is a 10-part radio drama. It is a murder mystery. And it is a straight up story.
Okay.
It is RuPaul at his finest, and he's a fortune teller in it. And Kristen Bell from...
Oh my God, from Veronica Mars.
Yeah.
I love her so much. And she's from Good Place too.
Yeah, I love her.
It's an all-star cast.
That's amazing.
Phenomenal, the people that they have in it. It's 1954. It's a snowy night. It's in a mansion in the country.
It's an Agatha Christie novel.
It's so... it's that, but it's 1950s American politics all throughout. So they say the most vile, awful things.
Wow.
And it is just salacious as. And so they're all eating dinner at this very well-heeled dinner party. And then somebody dies. They realise that they're snowed in. And then over the course of the 10 episodes, it always has cliffhangers. And even the trailer of what will happen in the next episode is really worth listening to, because they've spliced up the sounds in such a way that you're just like, oh my God, that's going to be a big reveal. What's happening? And they have RuPaul plays a fortune teller, and he's got an amazing voice. It is just so lush. And he's reading the fortunes out of all these different people attending the party, and there's politicians at the party and ex-Hollywood actors who have been like affected by the communist sort of red thing that was happening in Hollywood. And it's all very historical and political stuff is happening throughout. But there's also people being murdered everywhere. It's like so freaking over the top. It is so fantastically flamboyant that it's fun. It's good.
I'm gonna look that up tonight. Yeah, I'm like obsessed with the like radio drama format, so I have to listen to that.
And they do it in a really great way of staging it, because they have a narrator throughout who kind of describes certain things, because I mean somebody's holding a knife, and so it's kind of for the structure alone it's quite fascinating. And my last one is a book. It's by Brony Doyle, and it's called Adult Fantasy, and it was released last year. And it's a non-fiction memoir / critique of what it is to be growing up as a millennial in this in Australia specifically, and kind of the external impacts of real estate. The fact that we have to pay for our education, those costs are going up, the downsizing of job markets and the diversifying of job roles. So you spend years in tertiary education acquiring certain skills to graduate, to find out those jobs don't actually exist anymore. And if they do exist, they're being outsourced or contractual work. So the whole idea of having a job where you're trying to just pay rent, and all these kind of political decisions that have been made that are influencing our lives. But she doesn't sledge other generations.
Damn it.
And it is fantastic, because she opens the door of conversation that is often shut by the media or commentators.
Sort of positioning millennials and baby boomers as like, you know, in a boxing ring, and we've got to fight it out.
Absolutely. And she goes into great kind of detail about what it was like for preceding generations, and the idea that it's always young people who are perceived as being lazy or lost, or they don't know what they're doing and they're going to fuck everything up. And it's always the older people shit kicking on the young people. And she goes into like different newspaper articles over like different periods of time, and it's the same sort of stuff.
It's just a cycle that repeats itself every generation.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's like a thing of like times, and then like, I don't know, even from maybe the 80s or the 90s to now, and there's a front cover and it's some variation of like the me generation.
Yeah. That she points that back to even further than the 80s. Like that idea of...
Well, I mean, even think about, you know, like if you think about like the 60s and people that were sort of coming of age of the 60s, like the way, or the 60s and 70s, the way their parents were sort of thinking about what they were doing with their lives, you know, like
Absolutely.
This is not a new kind of idea.
I mean, you could go back, I think there's a thing with like ancient Greece, I can't remember which writer, but it's something like these young people to get today with their chariots and something like they're going too fast and they're very like literally older people have been like just sledging on younger people for time immemorial. It's really not a new thing.
It's
absolutely not.
And she kind of sets that up early in the book as well. But she makes a point. She's like, times are shit. We're blaming young people. Let's look at the wider picture and actually see that every generation is actually kind of suffering under certain political decisions at the moment in terms of people going into retirement with not enough money because superannuation is geared towards a certain lifestyle that not everybody has. So women are retiring poor. She looks
women are the highest, the quickest growing demographic of older women are the quickest growing demographic of homeless people.
Women over 50, it's not even that old.
No.
It is because superannuation is patriarchal in how it's designed and carried out. And what's really interesting is she goes into her dad's story because her dad's like a character throughout and is like, Bryony, you just need to do this and you just need to do that. And like, you know, you knuckle down and forget about that writing. And he's just like, just jot it, because he's a journalist. He's like, you know, just get a column or something. They'll pay you heaps of money. And it's quite heartbreaking that he gets retrenched and he gets another job and gets retrenched and gets another job, and he's churned through the media thing in a very short period of time of something he experiences what a lot of millennials have experienced and perceive as being a normal career cycle of you're uncertain about work, you're on contracts. He gets that right at the end of his career after having over 30 years of stable work. And then he's like, shit, like how we have structured things is
bad.
It's bad. And it's not down to young people just not putting in enough effort.
Yeah.
The system and structures in place are just, I've got chills because it makes me scared. But it's a really good book. It's well written. It's interesting.
And on a purely shallow level, it's got a great cover.
It's fabulous,
doesn't it though?
It's a really, really fantastic cover.
And a great title. Oh my goodness. Adult fantasy.
Yeah. Yeah, really cool. Well, those are great recs.
Yeah.
We're going to be super busy, like, watching and listening and reading each other's recommendations.
Oh my goodness, I'm going to go straight on to Queer Eye.
Definitely do. Cool. Well, thank you for listening to Literary Canon Ball. We hope you'll tune in again next month when we'll be talking about Why God is a Woman by Nin Andrews, which is our first book of poetry.
Yay.
Super exciting. Cannot wait to read that one, especially because the name of the collection just captures my attention straight away.
Yeah, definitely. In the meantime, if you want to continue the conversation or you just want your digital friends, you can follow us on Twitter at LitCannonBall, on Instagram at Literary Canon Ball, or find us on Facebook. And if you have something to tell us that's a little more than 280 characters, send us an email. Send us an email. Please. Our inbox is so lonely. We love to get emails at literarycannonball@gmail.com.
And make sure you check out our website at literarycannonball.com, and you'll find a full wrap of the show notes of this show and previous shows, and links to all our recommendations, which I think is reaching into, well, I say the hundreds, or at the least there's a lot of recommendations that we have up there.
Yeah, at least so many.
And it's diverse in terms of stuff that we like.
Absolutely.
Stuff that we recommend.
Definitely check them out. Cool. Episode 10. Done and done.
Yeah, into the double digits.
We're so grown up.
Yeah.
We'll be teenagers soon.
Oh my goodness. Growing pains. Don't take me back there.
Who's going to be Rosie? Who's going to be Wendy?
I'll be the dud.
All right, that's us done.
Okay.
Bye.
In quotes of my dad wrote a porno to one of my mates.
That sounds like a really fun thing to do.
Surely the dildo isn't made of sugar.